Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show for you this week. We're going to celebrate 20 years of Autoblog with a list of some of the most significant cars of the last 20 years. You'll want to stick around for that, and we'd love to hear perhaps what you think are the most significant cars of the last 2 decades. Lots of news this week. There's a new BMW M2. Willow is for sale out in California. I've got a lot of great memories out there, so that's kind of interesting to me. There might be a McLaren SUV, and a Hellcat is still running loose on the streets of Seattle. Someone needs to apparently maybe do something about that, maybe not, but it's definitely clicky and everybody seems to be interested in it, including the New York Times. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit. We've been driving the Subaru BRZ, the BMW X5 M60i. Our electric vehicle comparison finally has been published. We have the results and we'd love to tell you about it. We'll talk about the 2025 Honda Civic Hybrid and a few follow-ups on the Porsche 911 Dakar. We'll close things out with a couple of motorsports news. With that, let's jump right in with road test editor Zach Palmer. How you doing, man?
I am doing great. 20 years here at Autoblog. I've been here for 5 of them. I know we have someone on the podcast though that has been here for a lot more. So yeah, this is a cool week, isn't it?
It is. It really is. So I guess that's a nice way. If we were doing like cast introductions, we could end with the longest serving Autoblog cast member. What did they usually do with or and at the end of ensemble casts? That would be senior editor for all things consumer, Jeremy Korzeniewski.
Hello, all. My walker, I believe, is in the mail. Turning in my, I'll be on my 18th year of Autoblog writing starting in November of this year.
Are you the all-time leader in posts?
I am quite indeed the all-time leader in posts. It's nearing 9,000 in the last 18 years, something to that effect.
All right, there you go. The all-time post leader. That's Jeremy. So, obviously, hope all you who listen and read the site, thank you. We obviously like what we do, and we hope you like it as well. So, with that, let's get on with things here and talk about what's going on in the car world. And that is our most significant cars of the last 20 years. We just voted on this. You guys know the results, but were you guys surprised at all by the top 1 or 2 or no?
Not by the very top, no. I was surprised as I continued going down the list to see how it's going to shake out, like past the obvious 3 or 4. A lot of it, I think, when you're making votes like this, and we did this as like a staff where, we did a spreadsheet, people voted, we tallied up scores. When you're doing that, I think it's impossible to not have some sort of biases that play in. You've got certain, and that's why we score things across like the entire staff, so that helps to, elude that bias a little bit. But if you tend to be an environmentally friendly kind of person, you're probably going to cast votes more for, EVs, hybrids, plugins, that kind of thing, especially groundbreaking ones. If you are a performance nerd, then you're probably going to cast your votes in like super high performance cars and, groundbreaking new performance levels, 1,000 horsepower, stuff like that. And if you are, more a pragmatic person, you're going to look at like, this was groundbreaking because it kind of defined its segment, the first 3-row crossover that really started selling in huge numbers is obviously going to be very significant. So when you get past the super obvious choices, I think that's where the list really starts to get interesting.
So the list, I'll do the top 5 here. Tesla Model S won, kind of running away with the most votes. Then we had Chevy Volt, Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, Porsche Cayenne, and the 2005 Mustang. So obviously when we're actually doing this podcast before we publish the post, for some of these we do need to kind of be a little more precise, about which year and range we're talking about. But generally speaking, I think all of these were obvious choices and, pretty significant. So, what stood out to you there, Zach?
I think it was a unanimous Model S pick. I don't think you'll get many arguments at all about what is number 1 on the list at all. I was, slightly surprised to see Wrangler so high up there. It is in that sort of mesh between like all of the 30s and whatnot. I know that personally, I didn't vote for it to be within the top 5. You know, it was certainly in my top 10. But I had things like the F-150 Raptor, the Cayenne, and the Prius higher up on my most significant list among those. And I was also a little surprised to not see Prius in the top 5. I mean, we still see those things in like great numbers on the roads these days, and it's not quite as influential as the Model S is to me, but it is one of those landmark cars that I think really did change the landscape as far as hybrids and green driving went, and yeah, feels like a really high on the list of importance, at least for me.
Yeah, no, it's a good list.
It is, yeah. I think part of the issue with the Prius is that there was a generation before 20 years. And so that probably, like in certain people's minds, I'm with you on this for what it's worth, Zach. The second gen Prius is such a milestone vehicle. But the fact that there was a first gen Prius is probably what cost it some votes, which we're not really including the first gen Prius on this, not only because it's outside of our 20 years of Autoblog, 20 years of vehicles purview. But, also it was significant in that it was like, the world's first production hybrid, unless the Honda Insight was right around the same time too. It was the first like mass market one that was actually going to sell in great numbers. But the second gen one is really the landmark. So I guess I'm not super surprised where it landed, simply because there were hybrids before this, but it's the one that like it was the hybrid watershed moment, and so it deserves a spot really high on the list.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And it's interesting trying to look through the lens of the last 20 years. A lot to work with, but also there's a lot of things that really shape modern transportation, like the Prius, that did get their start really more in the 90s versus, the sort of the voted criteria that we went off of here. So check out the list. I think it's a good way to celebrate 20 years. Is we certainly had fun doing the debating, and I'm sure there will be more as we put this post together. Just to let everybody know how the sausage is made. Sometimes we just do editors' picks posts. Everybody just picks one and we move on with our day. That's kind of what I thought we'd do. But, well, I guess I was wrong, because everybody wanted to have this long voting, elaborate procedure. And we landed with, I think, a pretty good competitive list where there's some stuff on here that maybe wouldn't have made it. And I think that's great. And certain things were able to kind of get that like staff analysis. So they were weighted, and that allowed us to, I think, for example, the C8 Corvette, which we have currently slotted at number 8, I think is a very significant vehicle. But I think a lot of people have different takes on, that and the value of, hey, where does a mid-engine sports car fit? So we're able to get some good perspectives. So check out the list. It's a good list. And happy birthday to us. So let's talk some news. BMW M2. Zach, you wrote the story. Some very pretty pictures. Why don't you tell us, give us an overview of what the new sort of mission is for the M2?
Yeah, so it's the first refresh. A notable one for the M2. It's weirdly soon after the model was launched. It was completely new for the 2023 model year. And I guess one thing to note is that it's not following the same pattern as the previous M2, where it went from an M2 to an M2 competition to an M2 CS. It's still just called the BMW M2, but it is more powerful for 2025, has 473 horsepower now instead of the 453. And the automatic gets a notable boost from 406 pound-feet of torque to 443 pound-feet of torque. The manual's still working with the same 406 as before. And those are all fine and great. It's slightly quicker to 60, but I imagine it'll drive right around the same as before, except the automatic being a good bit torqueier off the line. The thing that I think will make a big difference is that you can actually get it in some colors now. Previously, BMW had this thing limited to just 7 colors. It was built in the same 2 Series plant in Mexico and wasn't available for BMW's individual program, et cetera, et cetera. It's still being built there, but BMW has added 10 different colors to the palette. Some really cool ones. You can get it in a green, a purple, a really cool red. There's just a lot more options for folks, which I think is, it's been like an M-car hallmark for a long time to have like really cool color options. And well, now you can finally do that with the M2. As far as interior stuff, it also has an updated infotainment system, iDrive 8.5, which it doesn't sound all that important. All right, we upgraded from iDrive 8 to 8.5, but in my view, iDrive 8 is really a bit of a downgrade from 7. Usability-wise, it is not great at all. Trying to go through the climate, the heated seats, the cooled seats, etc. iDrive 8.5 makes things a lot easier based on other BMWs that I've driven. So I think that this makes the M2 a much better candidate for daily driving, just ease of use wise, and won't frustrate you from a tech perspective. And the price really isn't that much more. It's $1,800 more expensive this year than it was before, with the added power, extra infotainment, some more standard features here or there. It's a nice little refresh. It's not a total revamp or anything like that. But I'll be happy to see more of these M2s in pretty colors, and it would definitely make me more likely to buy one now that it has all these upgrades. So, all
right. Sounds good. Sounds like they stayed the course, which, given some of BMW's recent, even mid-cycle updates, which have been at times controversial, it sounds like they stayed the course on, for most of this front. Any quick impressions, Jeremy?
Not really impressions. I would say, as far as M2 goes, I've gotten to the point where I actually prefer the smaller M2 over the bigger, M3, M4 platform. Simply because, I see those as very like extreme high performance. Like when I started in this industry, we're talking like supercar levels of performance is what, BMW's M series cars are at right now. I actually wouldn't buy an M2 or an M3 or an M4. I like the upper level, just regular 2 Series coupes. They're just like, everything is so well balanced. They don't, feel like you're riding a brick. When you're driving, the seats don't feel like, medieval torture devices when you're not on a racetrack. So for me, I actually go down a level performance for a little bit more driving enjoyment, personally, but, so impressive, like these, I don't know, is it like get last gasp, non-electrified, era of performance vehicles? I don't know exactly, but, it sure is impressive where they've gotten with these things.
The M2, I think, occupies a real sweet spot for enthusiasts. It would not fit my current life stage, but I like, where it sits. And I can see it being, I hate to say it, almost like a car for like the younger enthusiasts or the older, like the enthusiasts, whatever. Sort of bookends different life stages. But I would think of something, probably larger in the BMW lineup. But let's move on to Willow Springs is for sale. There was a listing that sort of made the rounds late last week over the weekend. This is a historic racetrack. I think it opened in the early 50s, I believe 1953. It was designed after some of just the classic road courses of Europe. I've been there a few times. I drove a McLaren 675 Longtail, Lamborghini Huracan, Mustang, and Camaro. And I think I did a press trip there, although I'm blanking on what exact press trip it was. But just an absolute beautiful course. It's about an hour and a half north of LA in a city called Rosamond. City is a generous term. It's more like just the middle of nowhere. And that's where this track is. sweeping vistas. You get the view of the elevation changes, the mountains, the terrain. There's kind of a adjacent track called the Horse Thief Mile, which is basically a movie set. It's kind of this twisty loop at the top end of the property where we've done some track tests up there too. But just a beautiful course. I hope it gets sold to somebody who will preserve it for what it is. There was some chatter earlier this week that it sounded like a social media person, influencer type, was interested in buying it and preserving it as a track, which I hope is what they would do. I have some more thoughts, but do you guys have any either memories of Willow Springs or any thoughts here on the outcome? Start with you, Zach.
Yeah, I've never actually been to the track in person before, but I have ran mini laps on Gran Turismo 7 and Gran Turismo's before it. Running those laps on video games makes me want to go out there and do it myself because it is a very fun track. Especially that super, super long final sweeper, I guess just one big long carousel of a corner. It sounds like you got to drive some pretty fast stuff out there, which it's a fast track, so it seems like it would be very well suited to it. I hope that somebody buys it and keeps it going because it is a sweet track. Kind of an odd setting out there in the desert with the mountains and sand, but that just makes it more unique and more interesting to me.
Ever been to Willow, Jeremy?
I have, but it's actually been a little while. All my memories of Willow Springs is just like literally watching like dust devils blow across the track until all the cars start taking, as they go by, they make their own dust. Super cool track. I remember the original, I want to say it was like 1993 Need for Speed game. I think it was like sponsored by Road and Track or something. And every time you watch like a little video of each car that was on there, it started out like the historic Willow Springs racetrack. And they had these like dust devils blowing around and like tumbleweeds, blah, blah, blah. That was my first introduction to the track when I was, a teenager. Getting to race on it for the first couple times. Not competitive race, but just drive on it. Was super memorable in my career. And I have a feeling that someone's going to buy it. The scuttlebutt that I've heard is that the asking price isn't very high.
2.3 million is one figure I've seen. I've seen
that too. For that price, like my guess is that might be like opening bid price. I would expect it to go higher than that. I don't know. Just the history of it. Let's be honest. There's a lot of people who drop $2.3 million on a car that's going to sit in a garage for forever. If they could, spend that money on a historic racetrack and maybe even build a little museum on it or something like. There's already stuff there, but I think it's going to survive. Like I don't think it's going to disappear off the radar entirely. I hope that someone doesn't buy it and just completely privatize it. Because it is a private racetrack. It's not like, the Nürburgring where you go out and it's like public roads, but, I hope that they keep it, operating in some level that, it's still accessible to people to actually go out and experience.
Yeah, Ken Miles actually had a hand in the start of the track in the 50s. It's been used for a million commercials. When I was out there, Lexus had just finished shooting something performance-oriented, as you would imagine. Ford versus Ferrari, I believe they did some shooting there. One of the great things about the track, and you probably remember this, Jeremy, from being out there, is it's pretty darn close to what it was in the early 50s. And I'll make kind of a weird comparison, but there's a very old golf course by the Detroit Zoo called Rackham, and it dates to the 1920s. And they've done almost nothing to it in the last 100 years. So when you could, except for a slight alteration in the 80s, but when you go into it, it's about the same as it was in 1924. And that's kind of how this track is. It's how it was in 1953. Could Could they bouge it up, make it like a car country club? Sure. Could they probably do that with this golf course? Probably. But it's kind of cool if they don't, because and some of it is clearly lack of funds and, business plans and all that. But just as like somebody who's been to places like this, I like that survivor on restored feel. And I think that's part of Willow's charm. It really is a step back in time that's still very contemporary and usable.
Yeah, and it's not like tracks like Coda don't exist, where there's like a mile of runoff in every direction, and huge grandstands everywhere, and press boxes and huge towers to watch the races from. It's not like super modern, almost like committee designed racetracks don't exist. They're everywhere. Willow is one of those cool ones that's like, yeah, this is how they used to do it. And to be able to go out and experience like, the glory days of 50s, 60s, 70s racing, and track layout. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. You gotta see what you can play in, in some of the different racing games too, like Gran Turismo. The Horse Thief Mile is also, it's part of the thing. Like I said, if you're out there and you have an opportunity to try it, try all the different configurations as well, because it's Big Willow, Little Willow, Horse Thief. It's all pretty cool. And so we'll see where it goes. One thing I think in the preservationists' favor is it is in the middle of nowhere. Unlike some tracks at golf courses and other things, where it'd be great to rip them down and put in a bunch of like McMansions, you're probably not going to do that out in the middle of the desert. Like there maybe is like in some sort of air base out there. I mean, it's remote. Like, again, the Air Force is out there because they don't want you to, be, lurking on what they're doing. So I think there's a good shot it'll stay a track. So one guy actually asked me out there if I was a flyer, which I took as a compliment. So that was cool. So we'll close with that and talk about McLaren. Rumblings are they might do an SUV. You guys think they should?
I definitely think that they should. McLaren has struggled here, it seems like, for quite a long time, trying to gain traction, remain profitable, and the number one thing to help that out would be probably to build an SUV. Ferrari has finally gone to it with the very expensive V12 Puro Sangue. The targets that they're talking about here, like right around 3,300 pounds, that would be quite the SUV if they're able to get close to a target like that. And they could charge an arm and a leg for it. So, yeah, I think that if McLaren built one, they would sell it. So long as they're able to execute it. I think they have to focus a little more on the tech, the luxury side of things than they do currently with most of their cars, because they're fairly bare bones and very, very directed toward the enthusiast, and they just might need to just consider the fact that it won't be the same buyer who's looking to go buy like a 765 LT that is trying to pick up a McLaren SUV.
I think that's 100% on right there. Is the whole point of doing an SUV is to get more buyers into your lineup. I don't know any brand that has attempted, let alone been successful, just trying to directly build a McLaren SUV. So they do need to grow, I think, as a company to accomplish that. And that's where, like, when we were talking about the most significant cars of the last 20 years, the 12C came on there because, McLaren was basically a racing and design firm, and then boom, they're making cars like one day out of the blue. Jeremy, you probably remember this around like 10, 11. It was a really big moment that they were back making road cars. To make something, now granted, making like basically a street legal race car, that's tremendous, but it's also pretty much what they know how to do. I question if they know how to make an SUV. So do I think they should do it? Yes, but I'm a little skeptical they could pull off something totally credible. But thoughts, JK?
Yes, I do remember. I was the one who nominated the 12C on our 20 list. I don't have anything to add past what you guys have already said. I think you've covered it well. I think it's obvious that they should do it. One of the reasons being, if you read our report on it, as storied of a name as McLaren is, especially on the racing side, but now more and more on the road going side, they are losing a lot of money. And if they want to maintain their status as a going concern, they're going to have to make these supercars that the extremely wealthy clientele is willing to buy. Recent history has shown that SUVs fit that bill. Kudos to Zach for rolling out Puro Sangue in a way that sounds so much better than my lips are able to pronounce that. Hopefully McLaren can come up with some sort of name that is pronounceable. So yeah, I mean, I think they should totally do it. I think your concerns are valid, Greg, that do they have the internal know-how? Maybe not, but it's probably hireable. And why wouldn't they? It's not like their main competition from Lamborghini and Ferrari, etc., isn't also doing the same thing. Lotus is going down that path. If you look outside the performance realm, but just like super expensive realm, Rolls-Royce, obviously Bentley did this a long time ago with the Bentayga. I think at this point it would be more strange for them to say, yeah, we're absolutely not going to do it. And also McLaren doesn't have the ability like Ferrari to deny that they're doing it forever and ever and ever. And then when they do, you're like, well, of course you did. McLaren doesn't quite have that, same level of, customers will forgive them for anything, as long as they think the end product is fine. So yes, McLaren should be working in an SUV, and no surprise that they are.
All right, so there's a Hellcat roaming the streets of Seattle. We did the story last week, almost 2 weeks ago by the time you guys are listening to this. At first, it seemed kind of like a novelty, a clickbait sort of thing, making the rounds on socials. But then lo and behold, the New York Times did a big, long feature on it, as have many other very mainstream, blue-blooded outlets. I've been a little surprised at the pickup. When I look at this, my thought is like, I don't really care about the noise. I mean, I don't know, come to Woodward Avenue in August and we'll tell you what noise really sounds like. But it's a little concerning just how fast this dude's going through a downtown area. And I don't think a little, I think it sounds kind of crazy. I'm frankly surprised they haven't, nabbed him or something, and done something to really put a stop to that, because it would seem like you have a pretty good idea of when he's going out and about, maybe get some choppers, scramble some, patrols. And if the dude's hitting triple digits, go get him. I don't know. I mean, to me, that's more of a safety issue. Otherwise have fun with your cars. Just got to do it in a safe manner. Jeremy, start with you. You used to live in Seattle. What do you make of this?
It's terrible. I mean, I'm an automotive enthusiast. I get buying a sweet car and wanting to go out and enjoy it, experience it, have fun with it, show it off to your friends. That makes total sense to me. I was a kid at one point, long ago. I had some fast cars. I bought a brand new RX-8 in 04. I've had plenty of muscle cars. You go out and find some country road, you do some burnouts, you do all these things, blah, blah, blah. I used to even talk to the police every once in a while and say like, hey, if I go out to so-and-so road and, do some 0 to 60 runs just for fun. And they're like, just don't crash. I get the having fun with your cool cars. You absolutely should not be doing that in downtown Seattle. Having lived there, there's homeless people all over the streets, on sidewalks all around if you do it in the middle of the night. If you don't do it in the middle of the night, there's tons of tourists and people who just, have the misfortune of living there while you are blasting down at 105 miles an hour. That is really dumb. It's just really, really dumb. It's not just inconsiderate. It's extremely dangerous. not the right spot. And it's not as if there aren't places that someone who can afford a $85,000 Hellcat, there's not, it's not like there aren't places that you can enjoy the speed and the power of a car like that. Having lived there, I know that there are available racetracks. There's available back roads. There's plenty of spaces where it's more appropriate to do this than downtown Seattle. So please just stop. Don't do this. You've got some sort of, social media fame, notoriety at this point. I would love to see, I'd love to see the guy continue on his, whatever level of success that he's looking for. Just please do so in a more respectful and not as dangerous manner.
Any thoughts there, Zach?
Yeah, so I was going to go after the whole racetrack. I mean, I feel like we've been talking a lot about racetracks here. There's a great one in Seattle. It's called the Ridge. Nearby. I was on that, man, a few years ago. That's the place to enjoy a car like this. I know that places like Bondurant, they use Hellcats as like the cars that people learn on at the driving school and whatnot. So if you really want to use like all 707, 717, 797, however much horsepower your Hellcat has, whether it's a red eye or a refresh, etc. That's the place to do it. It's definitely not Seattle because I've seen some of the videos. Reaching 100 plus rolling through downtown Seattle is not okay in the strongest of terms. So go find a racetrack. That's what I tell pretty much anyone that I see, speeding, whether it be downtown city streets, on the highway, wherever. Like, it's never worth it. Ever, ever, ever. It's however much fun that you might be deriving from it it's probably going to end badly eventually. So, yeah.
On a personal note, I'll just give this one little quip. A good friend of mine growing up bought a mid-90s Ram Air Firebird Formula, and he crashed it while street racing a Mustang. Ended up in the emergency room himself. The Mustang, or excuse me, the Mustang drove off and never to be seen again, but he ended up losing control, hitting another car that was parked on the side of the street, breaking the guy's leg in a couple points. That's what happens when you do this stuff. You're not just endangering your own life, you're endangering other people's lives. The fact that they're, kind of getting him on a noise charge seems, relatively inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. But if that's what it takes to get him off the street doing that, I'm all for hitting him with noise complaint warnings and fines and whatnot. You're young, you don't realize the consequences of your actions sometimes. Just please stop doing this.
Alrighty. Let's move on over to a more happy segment. Let's talk about some of the cars we've been driving. We've had some good ones. The Subaru BRZ, I thought was a lot of fun. Zach, you and I both, I believe, were in that this week. It's on our list, a little farther towards the bottom of it's in the top 10 of the most significant cars of the last 20 years. And I would agree with that. It was and it is a puristic sports car where the engagement is why you buy this car. I know automotive enthusiasts, journalists in particular, love this thing because of the chassis, the steering, the 6-speed manual. The styling, I think, is classic, like 60s, 70s sports car. Minimalistic proportions. It goes back to things like, great Porsches of that time period, like the Lotus Elan. I guess I'm really giving it some high praise here, but I enjoyed, my night in it. Got a lot of attention. I've driven a BRZ before. I've driven the 86, the Scion FRS. Remember that thing? They were all basically the same thing, but it's rough. But it's also a lot of fun to drive. It's, as an enthusiast, I think this is something that you would probably want to put in your garage if given the opportunity and, the amount of time, I guess, to make good use of it. So I had a great time with it. I would still recommend it as far as, enthusiasts. If you're looking for something, just go into it knowing it's a little coarse. And, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the attention was because of the TS badges on the front and back, since this was
Totally sweet.
since this was the BRZ TS that we had, which is, I mean, it's not quite the same like track focused TS that the previous generation BRZ was, but it is like a range topper with every performance goodie that Subaru can throw at it. I was an especially big fan of the Hitachi shocks that are on this thing. Now, the regular BRZ GR86 is a fairly stiff riding vehicle. This one is too, but these new shocks, I think, give it a more comfortable ride and more control. So I was pretty impressed by what Subaru did with this package here. Brakes also a notable upgrade. It's got the 4-piston Brembos in front, 2-piston Brembos in rear. Very reassuring, a lot better than just the regular floating piston brakes in the floating caliper brakes in the regular BRZ. So yeah, those two nice little things, a little suspension, a little brake, made this a more special BRZ. And I mean, if you can afford it over just the standard one, I would definitely recommend going to get the TS. Honestly, it's a nice little upgrade.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's Subaru's done a nice job of keeping this car, reasonably updated. It's again definitely something for enthusiasts. I think to consider it's good value. It's a lot of fun. And, you've got the BRZ, you've got the 86, and there's not a lot of other things out there at this price point that really offer this degree of interaction. It's even a bit of an old school vibe. So, it was a good way to kick off summer. I drove around. The last few weeks I've been driving with these long sort of Midwest summer nights. You can drive till 10 o'clock at night and it's still somewhat light out. Took that thing out for a cruise. I took the 718 Boxer out for a cruise, the 911 Dakar out for a cruise. It's kind of, I've been spending my Wednesday nights, which is a hell of a good time. So let's shift gears over to the something for BMW. The top of my sticker says this is the ultimate driving machine. I don't know if I'd say that totally applies to the BMW X5 M60i, but it was a very fast SUV, almost $6,000. Very powerful. It was a beautiful color scheme. Green, British Racing Green. Multiple people asked me about the color. You can't go wrong with British Racing Green. Saddle brown interior, and then it's a powerful M60, powerful V8. It's actually been a minute since I have driven a V8 SUV like this. I trying to remember the last one I did, but it sounded good. It was somewhat subtle. I tend to think if I were looking for an X5 or an M thing, I wouldn't, whatever thing that might be, this wouldn't be my flavor of brandy. But it's pretty nice. So I know you had a night in this, Zach. What do you think?
Yeah. Maybe it's not your flavor of brandy, but I think that this is like my sweet spot for the X5 lineup. I'm not a huge fan of the M competition. It's a little too stiff, a little too hardcore. It's a little too much M, I think, for a big family SUV. The M60i, though, really, really dials the suspension back a good bit. It's very comfortable wherever you take it. You're not getting punished over Michigan roads. And you still have a 4.4 liter twin turbo V8 that is like really, really quick when you get on it. The styling is, it's not too ostentatious. It's sort of pared back a bit. You still have some M logos here and there, but it doesn't have a wing on the back or an aggressive spoiler or 22-inch wheels. It's just, the medium spice spec of the X5 lineup. And, it's still really, really good handling. I love that engine so much. The transmission is super snappy. I think, if you're looking for a daily that has a V8, I would skip the X5 M comp and just go to this one, because I think that you're going to be much happier in the long run with the M60i. And I guess the last note, it does now have a 48-volt mild hybrid powertrain for this year, which makes it like super smooth, the start-stop system, which So I drove the pre-refresh one, and it was like it honestly does make a big difference having that electric boost torque right at the start. So yeah, high marks for this car. I'm a big fan of the M60i trim.
Yeah, very solid. I think it's one of the better overall powertrains I have tested in a while. Just for all the points you make, it was very well executed. And it's going to sound crazy, but I actually thought the value was very much there in abundance for $106,000 BMW X5. Just the pricing scales have changed so much, especially in the last 3-4 years, that I expected an M setup X5 with all this power and a very nice interior to cost this much money. So it seemed like the value was there in spades. And looking at the option box, there's the biggest single option was British Racing Green, followed by the driver assistance pack, and then very closely at just under $2,000 was the coffee extended merino leather. $7,000 for a SUV to look like this all day. I think it all adds up. Plus that V8 is a gem.
The value is not actually that bad, like you said, Greg. I heard the 106 and I was like, well, that's pricey. And I did a little bit of searching while you guys are talking about it. It's on par. It's what you expect to pay. Or you could wait 2 years and buy it certified pre-owned at a, 1/3 discount.
That's a good move.
Still with a big warranty. I think that's probably the direction I would go.
All righty. So let's move along to the EV comparison. Check this out. It went up last week. This is where we tried to rate and evaluate and test the most affordable electric vehicles. And we worked around the starting price point of about $45,000 because that is the ballpark average price of a new vehicle on sale in the United States. Zach, you kind of ran quarterback on this test. Jeremy, you were able to drive up from Columbus, and obviously as a Tesla owner, it was good to have that type of perspective. Zach, why don't you do the overview, just what we tested and real quick what we didn't test?
Yeah. So like you said off the top, we sort of put a number out there, about $45,000 is the point of entry for it. Hoping to gather a large group of EVs together that sort of represent the field as a whole. So we ended up with the Model Y long range, which we actually rented from Turo, Volkswagen ID4 Pro, Hyundai Kona Electric, and a Kia Niro EV. We invited a number of others, such as the Mustang Mach-E, Ioniq 5, Kia EV6, Nissan Ariya. Arguably, some of those probably would have done pretty well in the test, but the automakers either elected to send us other cars or just declined in general for the test. We ended up with those initial 4 that I mentioned there. So value was definitely one of the bigger targets for this test. Which of these EVs give you the most for your around $45,000? Some of them had the federal EV tax credit of $7,500 helping them out. Some of them did not. The winner of the test being the Tesla Model Y. You can go check that out on Autoblog. All of the reasons as to why it came in first place. Does have the federal EV tax credit, which definitely helps the value out a lot. Because it just ended up being a little bit too much car for the rest of them. The ID4 also got that tax credit, but just overall from a performance, a charging, a space, utility perspective, and even style, the Model Y was just the clear winner amongst this group. It was not universal. I will say that there were some really close votes between it and the ID4. It only won by 1 point, actually. So kudos to the Volkswagen there for a very, very close second place. Both the Niro and the Kona came in sort of a distant 3rd and 4th. But the Tesla Model Y was our winner, and I think a deserving one at that.
I was a little surprised how close it was. Inevitably this happens with our comparisons. They come down to like 1 point or 5 or fewer points or something. So I was a little surprised how close it was. Going into it, I kind of thought the Volkswagen might win just based on the overall sort of excellence that it offered. And I thought the Tesla might be polarizing. But I think both things held true and the Tesla still won. I think when you look at the value, the styling, and just the range and power, it makes total sense why we, awarded the Tesla the win. I think, it would have been interesting to see if a few other car makers would have showed up as well. That might have also flipped the field. So, Jeremy, I know you put aside your Tesla ownership in this, as you always do, but you did bring a unique perspective to this. So how did you feel about this event?
The Tesla is very polarizing. When you're looking at score sheets, it's different when you're testing a car versus you're spending your own money. You're literally giving advice to people when you're testing a car and doing a comparison like this. So, feelings about the brand, feelings about its very enigmatic CEO get put aside when you are filling out a score sheet. There's no line item for how do you feel about Elon Musk. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh God, I could never buy a Tesla, we get that. Everyone understands the opinions. Or if you're like, I would only ever buy a Tesla because I love Musk. Also, you vote with your own money. So that kind of goes away when you're like doing comparisons like this. So if that's what you're thinking as you're listening to this segment, just know that that kind of thing doesn't end up playing into the scoring outside of personal biases of the scorers. When you put it down on paper, it's actually a little bit surprising to me that the Model Y only won by 1 point. Simply because the range, the performance, the charging, the size, the price, like you put it all down, it's an extremely compelling package. After driving them, I get a lot more of the reasons why someone would not choose the Tesla. I own a Model 3, and I can tell you the Model 3 is much quieter inside. It feels a little bit more refined. The Model Y with its big hatch, open area, and I have to guess a little bit less rigidity due to the lack of the rear seat, bulkhead area. I was surprised the Model Y was as boomy as it was inside, a little bit rattly over bumps that I don't experience for my own personal Model 3. Also, our test car was, we had to get it off Turo because Tesla doesn't give out vehicles for comparison tests like this. So, who knows how the thing was driven. Maybe, I have some friends with Model Ys that aren't quite as boomy inside. Anyway, I was actually going into the test. The last time I drove a Volkswagen ID4, I walked away not super impressed by it. The changes that they made for 2024 are, seemingly small on paper, but extremely impactful in the real world. I like the ID4 in its latest generation or latest refresh much, much better than I liked the first edition. My biggest complaints with the ID4 and the reason why the Tesla came out tops on my own personal scorecard, the Volkswagen has some really odd low speed sensations while it's driving. Very strange, like body motions, swivels, like, just, I don't know, some strange wiggles that I wasn't the only person to comment on. Once you're underway, that goes away, and but it's hard to forget, while you're sitting in traffic and driving it. Also, as much as I hate the fact that Tesla, even as an owner, puts everything on the center display, it is more intuitive still and preferable, in my opinion, to Volkswagen system that really needs, in my opinion, a very thorough revamp to to get rid of that as a demerit in scoring. So I guess my takeaway was I was surprised at how competitive the Volkswagen was compared to the Tesla after driving them back and forth. I expected it to not perform particularly well, but was pleasantly surprised by how much I actually did like this latest version.
Both of those vehicles were kind of head and shoulders above the Niro and the Kona, which, while strong EVs, both of their brands make stronger entries. So it goes. But Zach, why don't you take us through any other thoughts here about the test and your observations about how it all went down?
Yeah, no. So like you were saying there, Jeremy, the ID4 was a bit of a surprise. This was my first time actually driving an ID4. And I think that I liked it, slightly more than most folks. I did have my quibbles about how it drove. The brakes themselves, probably, some of my most annoying issues with it. But I mean, the car that I thought should have won did in fact win, being the Model Y. I think we had a very comprehensive score sheet that, went over everything from interior storage to performance to the charging network, to the actual charging performance, how fast does it actually charge, to the utility. I mean, pretty much anything that, some buyer might be looking for. We went and scored and went through it all. And, just the actual closeness between the Model Y and the ID4, I think was one of the most surprising takeaways for most of us at the end of the day. I guess, like I also noted, if we had things like perhaps the Chevy Equinox EV or the EV6, we actually wrote a follow-up, green electric editor, John Snyder wrote the winner that could have been Post. We had an Ioniq 6 on hand at the same time that did not qualify because it was much more expensive than the rest of the field. But just having driven it, looking at the feature set, what the eGMP cars have to offer, I think that there was a good chance that, if an Ioniq 5 or an EV6 had actually been in the test, that one of those vehicles would have taken the cake. And just because it excels in some of the areas that the Tesla really lacks in, such as just general refinement. And it also charges right on par with it as well. It obviously doesn't have the Tesla supercharger network as a massive plus, but you can get to an Electrify America or EVgo and be out of there in about 15 minutes, which is about what you can do in a Model Y as well. So yeah, a lot of fun doing this test. I think we're going to have a very interesting field the next time that we do something like this, just because there are constantly so many new EVs coming out. And yeah, good times, and congrats to the Model Y for the W.
I think this is round one of our EV comparison, because I think just all the vehicles you mentioned, the Equinox, the Blazer, and some of these, to be fair, it's not like car companies wouldn't make them available. It's just they weren't available in the price point we were looking for. So, that's a situation where I think as the consumer, you'll run into the same situation. You might want a Mach-E, but you can't find one in the trim and, the price point. And that's what we were going for here. So go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to make a real quick point. I don't think it's surprising that our most, our ideal EVs were all built from the ground up as EVs. Okay. They not, in this price point, they are not sharing platforms with vehicles also powered by internal combustion. I think that makes a really big difference on the, the structure and the overall success of a vehicle. Also, if you're shopping for an Ioniq, a Hyundai, just know that if you do get the 6, it has limo-like rear leg space, but like mini rear head space. So, you have to be a very certain shape if you're going to use that back seat. Obviously, the Ioniq 5 would solve that issue. It doesn't have that sloping rear roof line.
All right, So check out the full test. We have the story, we have the videos, we have the sidebar from John. Check this all out. You can find it all on our website. It's very comprehensive. And again, I think this is round one. I look forward to testing more of these at this price point as the field grows. We think the EV market, it's kind of plateaued at about maybe 8% this year, but I've seen some projections that it might get to like 12% of new car sales. So we'll see if that happens, but a lot of that will be product driven. So let's leave it there. And Jeremy, while you have the mic, tell us about this new Honda Civic Hybrid that you drove in Quebec, one of my favorite places in North America, Montreal.
That's right. Yeah, Montreal was it's a great city. When you are confined to just a few hours of Montreal, you've got to go out searching a little bit to get through traffic and find nice roads to drive on. However, I was there for the Grand Prix as well, and it was awesome. So the Honda Civic Hybrid, I have nearly nothing bad to say about this vehicle. It immediately vaulted. The Civic was already one of my top choices as a compact, but this new hybrid version in particular, nothing is flawless, nothing is without fault, but this is about as close to the ideal compact car that I think you're going to find. When you look at cost of entry, it is even maxed out. It's $10,000 less than the average price of a new car in America. And people, compact cars have a little bit of a stigma in the United States as not being big enough. It's big enough. If you are a family of basketball players, it's not big enough. But if you are just, normal sized people, it is perfectly acceptable. Trunk space is like equal to the, Ford Taurus that I grew up, packing 6 people into as a family. Extremely well-behaved powertrain. They've really nailed this hybrid system. I kind of wish it had more battery capacity so that, it did have some, potential for EV only driving. Throw a plug on it would be awesome. That would obviously raise the price. So just no complaints, no meaningful ones that would dissuade me from saying to someone, yeah, go check this car out. It'd be my first choice for a brand new daily driver sedan in the United States.
I think bringing back the hybrid is a brilliant move. I feel myself already recommending this car to people as a sort of a Swiss Army knife of, car that would fit a variety of purposes. The price is just killer. I think that's Honda is one of the original value players, and the Civic really underpins that. So, how was the interior? I know one of the few things we've sort of, hit the Civic for over the years is the interior has been up and down. You might remember, was the 2012, 11 interior was just terrible. They the literally
dual-tiered instruments.
Yeah. So how's the new one?
You know what? I think it strikes the right balance between usable and stylish.
Okay.
Everything, the big problem with the dual tiered thing is that it wasn't always easy to see what is super easy or super necessary for you to have. One of my very good friends, when around that time, had a brand new one, and I drove it a lot. I rode in it a lot, and the interior was just too avant-garde for its own good. This is not like that at all. Everything is easy to reach, easy to see, easy to use. There's just enough style to make it not look boring. It's not just a sea of black plastic. Honda's done this really interesting thing in its most recent generation of passenger vehicles, where they're putting kind of this grid work down the center of it that integrates the HVAC vents. That is a really interesting thing to look at. The infotainment screen is significantly better than it was in the previous pre-recycle or pre-refresh. It's now using Google built-in and is very easy to use. The model I had was the Sport Touring Hybrid. It had the digital instrument cluster. I don't feel like that's strictly necessary, to be honest. The gauge cluster would be fine, but to get the infotainment, you have to get the Sport Hybrid Touring, or Sport Touring Hybrid. That is what I would recommend to most buyers, to get the hybrid powertrain and the nicer infotainment, and still low 30s, maxed out around $35,000. I can't think of a better car at that price point than the 2025 Civic Sport Touring Hybrid.
Sounds good. So we'll put a pin here in Montreal for a minute. Let's close out the drive section here with one more hit on the Porsche 911 Dakar, which Byron and I riffed on last week. But Zach, you also spent some time in it. We should note that the seats are a little more adjustable than we maybe hinted at before. There's a switch there, which can make it a little bit more comfortable. Still a little bit of a dicey situation getting in and out. But, you do have some flexibility there. But what did you do with this thing besides, were you the one who dropped it off for me? I'm trying to remember. You picked it up from me. So did you go off-roading? What did you do with this beast?
Yeah, man. So I hit some dirt roads that I'm pretty familiar with down sort of south of Ann Arbor in the Saline area, and just drove it all over Michigan highways, Woodward, like just driving it like you would a normal daily driver almost. And I sort of came to the conclusion that, if I was a very wealthy person, I would want to daily drive this vehicle. It genuinely feels like the most perfect Michigan sports car / daily driver all in one. The lift, the all-terrain tires, you can sort of drive it like it's a Honda CRV or whatever. Like you don't have to worry about scraping on anything. You can just run over massive potholes, whatever. And the 911 just soaks it up and goes on with life. But then at the same time, you got yourself a 911 powertrain, and it's also the GTS powertrain. So a lot of horsepower, super snappy, great PDK. And it's honestly even more playful than a normal 911 just because it has those all-terrains on it. So a more active rear end. Man, it is... I'm pretty sure that this is easily the most fun that I've had in a 911. And I've driven the GT3, various other versions of the Carrera, a couple older ones. Nothing has topped this, I don't think, for me. I guess sort of like I said up the top, if I could afford one, I would have one, which is about the highest praise that I think that most of us can hand to a car.
It's the most expensive 911 I've ever driven. I believe the sticker was over 200, 220, somewhere in there. But it also was one of I think the most confident because just the visibility was outstanding. I love driving low sports cars that are, all the great, suspension setups and things that sports car makers do to make them, hugging the road and intense. But when you're driving a 911 that's got that much ride height, all that power, I just felt so confident. It required so much mental recalibration. So I really like that about it as well. We got some more great coverage coming up on this thing. It's, it's definitely a bit of a unicorn. And then coming up, we'll talk about this on the podcast and write plenty of things. The Storato, the Lambo, the off-road Lambo is going to be gracing our driveways in the coming weeks as well. So that's going to be fun. All right, so let's throw things back over to you. We'll close out this podcast, not just this segment, but the show, with some motorsports. Jeremy, you went to the Canadian Grand Prix, which is definitely on my bucket list, and it's a fairly low-level bucket list thing. Montreal is like an hour and a half flight. I really need to do this. So tell me, how was it? Did you have some poutine and other Canadian, some Labatt Blue or Molson, I guess, in Quebec? How was it?
It's a Formula One race, so there's no beer available other than Heineken.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Heineken Silver and stuff too, right?
Oh, yeah. You want a beer? Do you want the no alcohol Heineken or the alcoholic Heineken? Those are your choices.
I like Heineken. I'm okay with that.
It's okay. It was an I mean, it was an awesome event, if I'm being honest. Really, really enjoyed it. The on-track action, I have 2 points to make about, and I'll try to keep it quick. The first one is that they really know what they're doing. They've been doing this for a really long time. People know the track. They know the layout really well. They, the location of everything is really well thought out, and I guess the best way to say is mature. The last Grand Prix I went to was in Vegas, which was a first year event, and mature would be the last adjective you'd use to describe it. So that was a really interesting contrast. The weather was poor for watching the race, but really exciting for the on-track action and what it caused the teams to do. There was on-track passing, there was pit passing, there was strategies involved with what tires to use. At one point, Ferrari sent Charles Leclerc out with slicks, which was exactly as disastrous as everyone who gasped when he left the pits thought it was going to be. And he ended up retiring shortly thereafter. Just a lot to focus on, an extremely exciting, eventful race to watch live in person. And the podium was super cool. We had a Red Bull, a McLaren, and a Mercedes all on the podium, which is about as fun of a result as you're gonna get.
It's a fun race. I made it my business to try to watch as much of it as I could. The rain made it interesting. It's a beautiful circuit. We talk about European inspired circuits. This one, which dates back to the early 60s, I think there is some parallels between this. There's another one in Quebec called Mont Tremblant, which is north of Montreal, and Willow. I think there's some parallels with just the architecture and that sort of golden age of track design in North America. It was a good race. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, one little caveat to that. The fact that it's an old track doesn't take into account just how massive the Formula One procession has become.
Yeah.
They were literally parking drivers, across the water onto a grassy area that was like just covered in mud. We watched them, cross a little bridge and move into the paddock area. It's kind of undersized for what Formula One currently is, which is a little unfortunate. It is what it is. Like, Formula One is growing in popularity, the number of fans that are coming, the number of side events. There was Porsche circuits, feeder races. There were Ferrari races to go along with it. Just a lot going on, and they are very size constrained because it is technically on an island.
Yep.
So there's not really much that they can do about it. And I don't think they're going to pull Montreal off the calendar anytime soon. But that does present some challenges that you don't face in some of the newer, more specifically race designed or current Formula One racing design circuits.
There was that issue on Friday practice, Jeremy. I don't know if you got caught up with it, where because of the rain, there ended up being a ton of fans that got turned away at the bridge trying to cross onto the island. Officers and just race security folks were telling massive crowds of people that it was delayed and then it was canceled and that you have to go home and go back. And obviously practice was not canceled.
No.
But no, I was reading online that there were a lot of angry race fans out there that had obviously bought tickets and then they didn't get to go see practice on Friday.
Yeah, that's correct. There was also a climate protest that caused a bit of a problem. I did see a lot of people just parking, when they were told that they couldn't drive through. You can walk through. So I saw some people parking really far away and walking in. And I can tell you, on race day, there were crowds there before the day opened to avoid any potential for missing the actual on-track action on race day. It's a difficult proposition to say, well, you got to get up at 8:00 in the morning and be in line by 9:00 if you want to watch the race at 2. That's kind of a difficult thing to tell people, but I can tell you that a lot of people were doing exactly that to avoid exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, I probably would have done that myself. It was like the best race of the year to watch on TV, at least for me. It was spectacular.
Same. Yeah.
I got there an hour and a half before we were allowed into our area, and several of us were just hanging out under a awning on some concrete steps until we were allowed to actually go in. And if that's what it takes to watch such a great race, then that's what I'm going to do.
All right. Reminds me a little bit, speaking of circuits, of the Belle Isle track where the Indy cars used to run here in Detroit. When you look at just the layout of where they currently have Villeneuve in Montreal, they, we'll say, like you guys both said, I don't think I ever see them dropping the Canadian Grand Prix in the near term, but they've got some issues to iron out for sure.
I think we're going to see them helicoptering drivers in short order. They're going to have to put a helipad in or something like that. And, I don't know exactly how it's all going to work out, but they're going to have to start being creative as the spectacle continues growing, just due to size constraints.
All right. So let's just real briefly talk about the IndyCar race here in Detroit. Just a really good experience. I think they moved it from the island to the streets of downtown Detroit. So you get like the Renaissance Center is the background. The fans are just on top of the action, which I think is really exciting. This was the first weekend of June, so IndyCar fans were not digesting the race, but just a really cool experience. And I think it shows what IndyCar can actually do for cities, especially a city like, Detroit and the Midwest, where people are really into cars. I don't think people are necessarily diehard Indy fans around here, but when you bring an event like that to the city, obviously it has great economic impact. And people really get into it. People really showed up for it. I thought it was a great experience. So it was good to see you, Zach. What did you think?
Yeah, no, when you said right off the top there about like the fans being on top of the action, like literally lining all of the parking garages around the track, which I honestly think were some of the best places to watch from. You can see the cars from above, multiple corners. I know that we were sitting in the front straight there, so we can see all the pit stops, which is a genuinely cool sort of pit lane. That's not normally something that you would analyze, but it's like a 2-lane pit lane almost. So they pull off to the left and the right, and then they have to merge into the middle. So if you have like 10 or 15 cars coming in at once, then you have like 10 or 15 cars trying to leave at the same time, and it can get a little dicey when they're both trying to merge into the same spot and peel out. So that makes for some fun watching for folks right there on the front straight. But yeah, man, just seeing Indy cars running through the city, really makes me think back to like what were the F1 races like out here on the streets of Detroit. Listening to those cars, the IndyCar V6s echo off the buildings. It's special, and it feels special. The racing itself, I think we hit like 9 or 10 full course cautions.
Oh, man.
I felt like the pace car was actually like leading more laps than anyone on the actual track was, which was a little disappointing. I know that the first one was not like that, but we had rain and the drivers just seemed a little more aggressive than normal, going in the corners, trying to go 3 wide, 4 wide, and led to a lot of accidents. So hopefully next year there's a fewer cautions, great events, and I really hope that they just keep racing on the streets of Detroit.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was very entertaining. I think everybody had a good time. And Scott Dixon, of course, was the winner. If you somehow missed that in the last couple of weeks, but it's definitely become a good event for Detroit. So, All right. I think we've hit it. Almost hour and 15-minute show. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Thank you all for listening. Happy birthday to Autoblog again. This is our 20th anniversary. We try to do this pretty well. We hope you guys enjoy what we do here. If you enjoyed the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. We'd love to spend your money. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.